The psychological impact of war-induced famine is particularly insidious. Beyond the physical suffering, there's the moral degradation, the breakdown of social norms. You see people driven to acts they would never have contemplated in times of peace, stealing from neighbors, abandoning the weak, even resorting to cannibalism in the most extreme cases. The bonds of community, forged over generations, unravel under the relentless pressure of individual survival. It's a terrifying transformation, watching humanity stripped bare, reduced to its most primal instincts. It's a chilling reminder that civilization, for all its grand achievements, is a thin veneer that can crack under the strain of prolonged deprivation. Imagine the gnawing hunger, not as a mere discomfort, but as a burning fire in your gut, consuming you from the inside out. It's a constant, agonizing torment that overshadows every other sensation, every other thought. Your mind, once capable of complex reasoning, is now singularly focused on one thing: food. Any food? The distinction between edible and inedible blurs, then vanishes entirely. You've already consumed every last scrap of grain, every edible root, every insect you could find. Now you look at the world with the new, desperate eyes, searching for anything that might offer a fleeting calorie, a momentary reprieve from the relentless pain. You wake with the first hint of dawn, not to the gentle chime of an alarm, but to the insistent rumble of an empty stomach. It's a familiar companion, this hollow ache, a constant reminder of the precarious tightrope you walk. You stretch, your muscles protesting, already weary from a sleep punctuated by the distant cries of a hungry child and the rustle of rats in the thatch. Outside your mud brick hut, the air is thick with dust, not the refreshing scent of morning dew. The sun, of relentless eye, is already beginning its ascent, promising another day of scorching heat and parched earth. You glance at your small, dirt-floor dwelling, a meager shelter against a world that feels increasingly hostile. There's no breakfast spread, no steaming cup of whatever passes for coffee in this era. There's just nothing. The last handful of dried grain was consumed yesterday, a desperate, meager offering to quell the immediate pangs. You see your neighbors, once proud and dignified, reduced to scavenging through refuse, sifting through the dirt for forgotten crumbs. You watch them chew on leather straps, on tree bark, on the very straw from their roofs. The taste is bitter, the texture unyielding, but the act itself is a desperate attempt to trick the stomach, to provide the illusion of sustenance. Your own hands reach for a piece of dried animal hide, tough and tasteless, and you chew, and chew, and chew, until your jaw aches, hoping against hope that some minuscule nutrient might be extracted. It's like trying to get a 5-course meal out of a single, very old shoe. Not exactly gourmet. Your village, once a bustling hub of activity, now moves with a slow, almost mournful rhythm. Faces, once etched with the lines of hard work and simple joys, are now gaunt, eyes sunken, reflecting the pervasive fear that hangs heavy in the air. You see your neighbor, a woman who once laughed easily, now meticulously sifting through the dust near her granary, hoping for a stray kernel, a forgotten seed. It's a futile exercise, but hope, even in its most desperate form, is a stubborn thing. This isn't just a bad harvest, this is a famine, a creeping, insidious monster that devours not just food, but dignity, hope, and eventually, life itself. One of the most horrific and often whispered about realities of ancient famine was the resort to cannibalism. While rare and usually a last desperate act, it occurred in the most extreme circumstances, particularly during prolonged sieges or isolated periods of intense starvation. You hear the rumors, hushed and terrifying, of families turning on their own, of desperate acts committed in the darkest corners of the village. The very thought sends a shiver of revulsion down your spine. But the primal fear of death by starvation is a powerful, corrupting force. It's a taboo so profound it tears at the very fabric of humanity. A line no one ever wants to cross, but one that hunger, in its ultimate cruelty, could force people to step over. Historians still debate the true prevalence of cannibalism during ancient famines, as records are often scarce and sensationalized. But archaeological evidence in some extreme cases does suggest it occurred. You remember stories your grandmother told, tales of the good years, when the rivers flowed full and the fields yielded their bounty, She spoke of feasts, of overflowing baskets, of children with round, healthy cheeks. It sounds like a myth now, a fantastical dream from a forgotten age. For you and for generations before you, existence has been a relentless dance with scarcity. The concept of abundance is as alien as the idea of flying to the moon. Your life, from birth, has been shaped by the ever-present shadow of hunger, a primal fear that dictates every decision, every waking moment. Beyond the physical acts, there was the agonizing moral calculus. You are faced with impossible choices. Do you share your last meager portion of food with your aging parent, knowing it might mean your child goes without? Do you try to protect your own small hoard from desperate neighbors, even if it means turning away a starving friend? The bonds of kinship, of community, that once seemed unbreakable, are tested to their absolute limits. Compassion becomes a luxury, a dangerous weakness in a world where every calorie is a matter of life and death. You see the suspicion in people's eyes, the guarded glances, the silent calculations of who is weakest, who has less. It's a grim game of survival where the rules of decency are suspended. You step outside at the dry earth crunching under your bare feet. The fields, stretching out beyond the village, are a desolate sight. Where once vibrant green shoots promised life, now only cracked, sun-baked soil remains. The stalks of what should have been your staple crop stand withered and brittle, like skeletal fingers reaching vainly for a sky that refuses to weep. The last rain, you recall, was weeks ago, a fleeting tease that only deepened the despair. Farmers, usually a stoic lot, sit by their barren plots, their shoulders slumped, their spirits broken. The tools of their trade, the crude plows, the simple hoes, lie abandoned, useless against the might of nature's indifference. It's a cruel joke, isn't it, humanity? So clever, so capable of building grand cities and intricate irrigation systems, brought to its knees by the absence of a few drops of water. It's like building a magnificent house, only to realize you forgot to put in a roof. A common historical fact is the practice of infanticide, particularly of female infants, during severe famines. In societies where sons were valued for their labor and ability to carry on the family name, and daughters were seen as an additional mouth to feed with less immediate economic return, desperate parents sometimes made the agonizing decision to abandon or kill their newborns. You hear the faint, heartbreaking cries of an infant, then silence. You avert your gaze, your heart heavy, knowing the impossible choice that was made. A decision born not of malice, but of the brutal arithmetic of survival. It's a stark reminder of how famine could twist the most fundamental human instincts, turning love into a burden and hope into despair. You join a small group heading towards the riverbed, not for water, for that, too, is scarce, but for anything at all that might offer sustenance. Perhaps some edible roots, a few desperate weeds, even insects. You've learned to identify every plant, every creepy crawly that might offer a meager calorie. Your knowledge of botany has expanded exponentially, driven by the most urgent of teachers' survival. You dig with your bare hands, your nails caked with dirt, your fingers aching. The sun beats down, relentless, making the air shimmer above the cracked earth. You feel lightheaded, your vision blurring at the edges. This isn't just hunger, this is starvation, a slow, agonizing process that systematically shuts down your body, organ by organ. Your metabolism slows, your muscles waste away, and your immune system, once a vigilant guardian, becomes a flimsy sieve. The breakdown of law and order was another inevitable consequence. When people are starving, the social contract unravels. Theft becomes rampant, not for luxury, but for survival. Raids on neighboring villages, once unthinkable, become a desperate necessity. You see desperate individuals, once law-abiding, now driven to steal, to fight, to do whatever it takes to put something, anything, into their mouths. The authorities, if they still exist, are often powerless or worse, complicit, hoarding food for themselves while the populace starves. The world becomes a brutal free-for-all, where might makes right, and the weak perish. It's like a zombie apocalypse. But instead of brains, everyone is just really, really hungry. Historians still debate whether the earliest forms of organized agriculture, while revolutionary, actually increased the overall vulnerability of human populations to famine. Before settled farming, hunter-gatherer societies, while living a precarious existence, often had a wider variety of food sources and could migrate when local resources dwindled. Once you commit to a single crop, a single location, you put all your eggs in one very fragile basket. It's like putting all your life savings into one stock. Then watching the market crash, oops. A unique detail about the desperation of famine is the widespread consumption of famine bread, or hunger bread, made from highly unusual and often dangerous ingredients. This wasn't just coarse grain, it was often mixed with sawdust, ground bones, clay, straw, or even toxic weeds to extend the meager flour supply. Imagine the taste, the texture, the sheer indigestibility of such a concoction. You force down a piece of this bread, your throat burning, your stomach churning. It offers no real nourishment, only a false sense of fullness, and often further illness. Your body aches, your mind is clouded, and you know, deep down, that this isn't food, but a slow poison. It's like eating a brick and hoping it'll turn into a steak. Spoiler, it won't. You remember the last time a trading caravan came through? They had grain, yes, but the prices were astronomical, far beyond what anyone in your village could afford. The few who had managed to hoard some precious silver or copper exchanged it for a meager ration, enough to stave off death for a few more days, but not enough to truly nourish. You saw a mother, her eyes wide with desperation, offering her most prized possession, a finely woven blanket, a family heirloom, for a small sack of millet. The merchant, his face impassive, took the blanket and handed over the grain, his gaze already scanning the horizon for the next desperate soul. It's a brutal economy, driven by the most basic of human needs. The desperation also led to the abandonment of the elderly and the sick. In times of extreme scarcity, resources were prioritized for those most likely to survive and contribute to the community's eventual recovery. The old, the infirm, those too weak to work or flee, were often left behind. A tragic but pragmatic decision in a world without safety nets. You see the vacant stares of the abandoned, their silent pleas echoing in the empty spaces they leave behind. It's a chilling testament to the brutal logic of survival, where sentimentality is a luxury no one can afford. The concept of food security as we understand it today, the idea that everyone at all times has physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food, was utterly alien to the ancient world. For them, food security was a good harvest, a full granary, and the hope that the gods would be benevolent next season. There were no global aid organizations, no emergency food reserves, no international treaties on humanitarian assistance. When the crops failed, you were, quite simply, on your own. Or rather, your community was on its own, facing a common enemy that transcended tribal loyalties or political boundaries. Historians still debate the ethical implications of these desperate measures, questioning whether such acts born of extreme duress can truly be judged by normal moral standards. Were these acts of evil, or simply the tragic, inevitable consequences of a system pushed beyond its breaking point? The answer perhaps lies in the gray areas, in the profound human capacity for both resilience and degradation when faced with the ultimate threat. One particularly grim detail from ancient famines, often overlooked, is the widespread consumption of famine foods. These weren't just wild plants or insects. They included things like leather, sawdust, tree bark, and even clay. Imagine the texture, the taste, the sheer desperation of trying to extract any nutritional value from such materials. You chew on a piece of dried leather, tough and tasteless, your jaw aching. It offers no comfort, no satisfaction, only the illusion of something in your stomach. Your body, however, knows the truth. It continues to waste away, fueled by nothing but the faint embers of your will to survive. It's like trying to run a marathon on a diet of lint and good intentions. Spoiler alert, you won't make it to the finish line. Even the act of burial, a sacred ritual in most cultures, became a luxury. Bodies, emaciated and ravaged by disease, often lay unburied, or were hastily interred in mass graves without ceremony or mourning. The sheer volume of death, combined with the weakness of the living, made proper burial impossible. You walk past the unburied dead, their eyes staring blankly at the indifferent sky, and you feel a profound sense of dehumanization. Your own mortality looms large, a constant, terrifying presence. The dignity of death, like the dignity of life, is stripped away by the relentless march of starvation. The nights are the worst. The cold seeps into your bones, and the hunger, momentarily forgotten in the frantic search for sustenance during the day, returns with a vengeance. You lie awake, listening to the sounds of the village, the occasional cough, the restless shifting of bodies, and the soft whimpers of children. Your own child, a tiny bundle beside you, stirs. You reach out, your hand brushing against her feverish brow. Malnutrition, makes the body weak, susceptible to every passing illness. A simple cold, a minor infection, can become a death sentence. You pull her closer, whispering ancient lullabies, hoping to soothe her, to offer some comfort in a world devoid of it. You pray for rain, for food, for an end to this waking nightmare. You pray for a miracle. But miracles, you've learned, are in short supply when the granaries are empty. So, when the rains didn't come, when the armies marched, and when disease swept through, ancient people were forced into a terrifying crucible of choice. The decisions made in those desperate times were not about comfort or prosperity, but about the raw, brutal instinct to survive, no matter the cost. You stand in the shadow of these agonizing choices, a silent witness to the profound depths of human desperation, and the terrible reality that, sometimes, the most horrifying acts are born not of malice, but of the sheer, overwhelming will to live. Your own survival in such a world would be a testament not just to luck, but to the capacity for unimaginable endurance, and perhaps into the dark compromises you might have been forced to make. This wasn't just a periodic inconvenience. It was a fundamental aspect of life for most of humanity for thousands of years. From the early agricultural societies of Mesopotamia and Egypt to the vast empires of Rome and China, famine was a recurring, often devastating event. It shaped economies, influenced politics, and drove migrations. It was the ultimate equalizer, bringing kings and commoners alike to their knees. Though, as we'll see later, not always equally. The memory of famine, the deep-seated fear of its return, permeated ancient cultures, influencing religious beliefs, social structures, and even the very language people used. Every civilization, in its own way, had to grapple with the terrifying reality that the food supply was never guaranteed. It was a constant, existential threat, far more immediate and terrifying than any invading army. You might escape the sword, but you couldn't escape the empty stomach. You've witnessed the depths of individual desperation, the agonizing choices forced upon people when hunger becomes the only reality. But famine, in its relentless march, doesn't just break bodies and minds, it systematically dismantles the very structures that bind humanity together. Tonight, we explore societal collapse when food runs out, a chilling look at how the fabric of ancient societies could fray, unravel, and sometimes completely disintegrate under the crushing weight of widespread starvation. This is where the grand narratives of empires and civilizations give way to the stark, brutal reality of survival. You felt the gnawing emptiness, the relentless sun, the despair of barren fields. Now, let's rewind a bit to the varied dawn of this precarious existence. You see, for hundreds of thousands of years, your ancestors roamed, hunter-gatherers, following the seasons, the herds, the ripening berries. Their lives were undoubtedly hard, filled with immediate dangers and constant movement. But they possessed a certain resilience born from diversity. If one food source failed, they moved to another. If the berries didn't ripen here, perhaps they would elsewhere. It was a nomadic buffet, albeit a very tough one. But then, something shifted. A revolutionary idea took root, quite literally, in the Fertile Crescent, along riverbanks, and in sun-drenched valleys. You, or rather, your distant ancestors, decided to stop chasing your food and start growing it. Imagine your village, once a microcosm of order and cooperation, now a shadow of its former self, the communal spirit, the shared labor, the unspoken agreements that governed daily life, all begin to crack under the strain. The elders, once revered for their wisdom, find their authority diminished as their knowledge of past harvests becomes irrelevant in a world without food. The leaders, whether tribal chiefs or local magistrates, struggle to maintain control, their decrees falling on deaf ears when the most basic needs of their people cannot be met. The very foundation of governance, built on the premise of providing security and stability, crumbles when the most fundamental security, food, vanishes. It's like trying to run a complex machine when half its gears are missing. Eventually, it just grinds to a halt. This was the birth of agriculture, the moment humanity decided to put down roots to coax sustenance from the earth itself. It sounds marvelous, doesn't it? A steady supply of grain, enough to feed a growing population, the promise of settled life, permanent homes, and perhaps even a little leisure time to invent things like, writing or monumental architecture. But what you don't immediately grasp, what your ancestors learned through generations of bitter experience, is that this magnificent leap forward came with a terrifyingly fragile Achilles heel. This was the fragile scythe, the inherent vulnerability of relying on a handful of domesticated plants. The first casualty is often trust. You look at your neighbor not with camaraderie, but with suspicion. Do they have a hidden stash? Are they stronger, more cunning, more likely to survive at your expense? The collective good, once a guiding principle, is replaced by individual survival. People hoard what little they have, guarding it fiercely, even from family members. The sharing economy, common in many ancient communities, collapses as scarcity breeds selfishness. The unspoken social contract, where you help your neighbor in exchange for their help, dissolves when there's nothing left to give or receive. Imagine yourself, a pioneer of this new way of life. You've cleared a patch of land, perhaps near a river, and carefully sown your precious seeds, maybe wheat, or barley, or millet. You watch them sprout, tiny green promises pushing through the soil, and a thrill of hope courses through you. This is it. This is progress. But then, the first challenge emerges. The sky, which once seemed so generous, becomes a fickle mistress. Too much rain, and your young shoots drown, their roots rotting in waterlogged soil. Too little, and they wither and die, just like the fields you saw in the last part. There's no weather forecast, no sophisticated irrigation system beyond a few ditches you've dug with your bare hands. You are entirely at the mercy of the heavens. A celestial lottery where the prize is survival and the cost of losing is everything. It's like building a house of cards on a trampoline. One wrong bounce, and it's all over. Then comes the breakdown of law and order, a consequence you briefly touched upon earlier, but one that deserves a deeper look. When the authorities can no longer feed their people, their legitimacy evaporates. The guards, the soldiers, the enforcers of the law are themselves starving, their loyalty wavering. Why uphold a system that cannot sustain them or their families? Theft becomes rampant, not just petty pilfering, but organized raids on granaries, on homes, on anyone perceived to have something. You barricade your door at night, not just against wild animals, but against desperate humans. The streets, once safe, become dangerous, haunted by shadows and the desperate cries of those seeking to take what little others possess. It's like the Wild West, but with less cowboy hats and more empty stomachs. And it wasn't just rain. The sun itself, the very source of life, could turn into an enemy. A prolonged heat wave, a sudden cold snap in spring. Any deviation from the delicate balance of nature could spell disaster. You walk through your nascent fields, your heart sinking with each brittle stalk you touch. The air is still, heavy, and the dust, the dust. It coats everything, a fine, gritty reminder of the parched earth. You try to remember the ancient wisdom, the signs in the sky, the patterns of the winds. But sometimes, nature simply doesn't play by the rules. A common historical fact is that large-scale famines often led to mass migrations, effectively depopulating entire regions and shifting the demographic landscape. When the land could no longer support its inhabitants, people had no choice but to leave, seeking sustenance elsewhere. You join the endless stream of refugees, a river of humanity flowing away from starvation towards an uncertain hope. These migrations weren't orderly movements. They were desperate, chaotic exoduses, often leading to conflict with existing populations in the areas they entered. The pressure on resources in the destination regions would escalate, potentially spreading the famine or creating new conflicts over dwindling supplies. Entire cities could be abandoned. their once bustling streets becoming ghost towns, monuments to a civilization that could no longer feed itself. Hey guys, tonight we're going to dim the lights, settle into our coziest blankets, and embark on a journey back in time. But this isn't a fairy tale, nor is it a comforting lullaby. Tonight, we're peeling back the layers of history to reveal a truth that's far from sweet dreams. The terrible reality of ancient food famine. Imagine it, if you will. A world where the simple act of eating, of nourishing your body, wasn't a given. A world where the next meal was a desperate prayer, a constant, gnawing anxiety that clung to your very bones. You might think, oh, a little hunger. I can handle that. But trust me, you, with your fully stocked pantry and delivery apps, would probably not survive a single ancient famine. Not even close. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The religious institutions, often central to ancient societies, also faced immense challenges. When prayers for rain go unanswered, when sacrifices yield no bounty, faith itself can be shaken. You see the priests, once powerful figures, now looking as gaunt and desperate as everyone else, their rituals seeming hollow, their pronouncements losing their power. Some might cling to their beliefs even more fiercely, seeing the famine as divine punishment, while others might abandon their gods entirely, feeling betrayed by the heavens. The social cohesion provided by shared religious practices begins to unravel, adding another layer of instability to an already fractured society. Then there are the pests. Oh, the pests. You've put all your eggs, or rather, all your grain, in one basket. And what do pests love more than a monoculture, a vast, unbroken field of their favorite food, stretching as far as the eye can see? Locusts, those swarming nightmares, descend like a living cloud, devouring everything in their path, leaving behind only stripped stalks and utter devastation. Or perhaps it's a blight, a fungal disease that spreads silently, turning your promising green crop into a sickly, rotting mess. You watch helplessly as your livelihood, your family's future, literally vanishes before your eyes, consumed by an unseen enemy or a million tiny ones. There's no pesticide, no fungicide, no understanding of crop rotation or genetic resistance. Your only defense is a desperate prayer, a futile wave of your arms, or perhaps a very loud, very frustrated scream. It's like inviting all your relatives over for a huge feast, only to realize the entire meal has been eaten by ants before anyone arrived. Awkward. A unique detail about societal breakdown during famine is the rise of opportunistic cults or charismatic leaders promising miraculous solutions. In times of extreme desperation, people are vulnerable to anyone offering a glimmer of hope, no matter how outlandish. You hear whispers of a prophet who claims to be able to summon rain, or a charismatic figure who promises a secret cache of food. People, driven by desperation, flock to these figures, abandoning their traditional leaders and social structures in a desperate gamble for survival. These movements often ended in further disillusionment and tragedy, but their emergence highlights the profound psychological need for hope and direction when all else has failed. It's like falling for a scam email promising you $1 million because, well, you're really, really broke. Beyond the immediate threats, there was a more insidious, long-term challenge: soil depletion. Your ancestors, brilliant as they were, didn't have a firm grasp of sustainable agriculture. They didn't understand crop rotation in its full scientific glory, or the need for fertilizers beyond the occasional animal dung. They would plant the same crop year after year on the same patch of land, slowly but surely sucking the nutrients out of the soil until it became barren and unproductive. You see the older fields, once vibrant, now yielding less and less with each passing season. The soil feels tired, lifeless, crumbling to dust in your hands. You know, instinctively, that this land is giving up, but you don't know how to revive it. The only solution, often, was to move on, to clear new land, pushing further into the wilderness, a constant expansion that eventually ran into its own limits. Historians still debate whether societal collapse during famine was primarily a result of the direct effects of starvation, death, weakness, or the indirect effects of social breakdown. Oh, loss of trust, increased violence, breakdown of governance. It's a chicken and egg question, isn't it? Did the hunger cause the social fabric to fray? Or did the fraying social fabric exacerbate the hunger? The truth is likely a complex interplay of both, a vicious cycle where each factor amplified the other. Historians still debate whether the shift to agriculture, while supporting larger populations, led to a decrease in the average health and nutritional status of early human communities due to reliance on a narrower diet and increased exposure to disease in denser settlements. It's a fascinating thought, isn't it? That the very thing that allowed us to build civilizations might have made us, individually, a little less robust. The education system, if one existed, would cease to function. The teachers, the scholars, the scribes, those who held the knowledge of the past and the keys to the future, would be too weak to teach or too busy searching for food. The children, instead of learning, would be forced into labor, scavenging, or simply trying to survive. The transmission of culture, of knowledge, of the very essence of what made a society unique, would be interrupted, potentially lost forever. The future generations would grow up in a world defined by scarcity, their understanding of the past shaped by the trauma of famine. Consider the early irrigation systems. In Mesopotamia, along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, people developed sophisticated networks of canals to bring water to their fields. This was a monumental achievement, a testament to human ingenuity. You spent countless hours digging, maintaining, and cleaning these canals, your back aching, your hands calloused. The water flows, a lifeline, transforming arid land into fertile ground. But there's a hidden danger, a silent killer beneath the surface salinization. As the water evaporates from the fields, it leaves behind dissolved salts, slowly accumulating in the soil. Over generations, these salts build up, turning once productive land into a white, crusty wasteland where nothing can grow. It's like trying to quench your thirst with seawater. It seems like a good idea at first, but it only makes things worse. This was a common historical fact, a slow-motion ecological disaster that plagued many ancient agricultural societies, forcing them to abandon once fertile regions. Even the concept of family, the most fundamental social unit, could be strained to its breaking point. While some families clung together with fierce loyalty, others fractured under the pressure. Parents might abandon children they could no longer feed, or children might leave elderly parents to fend for themselves. The traditional roles within the family, the reciprocal duties and responsibilities, could become unsustainable. The very idea of providing for one's kin, a primal instinct, was challenged by the brutal reality of having nothing to give. You see the hollow eyes of a parent who has made an impossible choice, a choice that will haunt them for the rest of their days, if they even survive. Contrast this with the Nile in Egypt. You live by the rhythm of the river, waiting for the annual inundation. The floodwaters, rich with fertile silt from the Ethiopian highlands, spread across the floodplains, depositing a fresh layer of nutrients before receding. This was a natural, self-renewing fertilization system, a gift from the gods. You stand on the riverbank, watching the waters rise, feeling a cautious optimism. This predictability, this annual bounty, made Egyptian agriculture remarkably resilient. But even the Nile, for all its generosity, could be fickle. A low flood meant less fertile land, less water for irrigation, and thus a smaller harvest. A high flood could destroy villages and crops alike. Even with the best natural conditions, the margin for error was razor thin. The economic system, whatever its form, would grind to a halt. Trade would cease, as there would be nothing to trade. Markets would empty, as there would be nothing to sell or buy. The currency, whether shells, silver, or grain itself, would lose its value, as food became the only true measure of wealth. The intricate web of supply and demand, the specialization of labor, the very engine of economic life, would seize up. People would revert to subsistence, each person trying to find enough for themselves, a return to a more primitive, less efficient mode of existence. It's like the entire stock market just decided to take a very long, very hungry nap. A unique detail you might not know is how some early agricultural communities, particularly in regions prone to drought, developed elaborate rituals and sacrifices to appease rain gods or fertility deities. You participate in these ceremonies, your voice hoarse from chanting, your body swaying with the rhythmic movements. You offer your most prized possessions, even your last meager scraps of food, hoping to curry favor with the unseen forces that control the skies. It's a desperate act, born of a profound understanding of your own powerlessness. You truly believe, that your actions can influence the heavens. Because what else is there to believe in when your very existence hangs by a thread of moisture? It's a bit like doing a rain dance before a big exam, hoping it'll make the answers appear. Probably not. But hey, worth a shot. Right? The military, too, would be severely impacted. Starving soldiers are ineffective soldiers. Their morale would plummet, their discipline would break, and desertion would become rampant. An army, no matter how well equipped, cannot fight on an empty stomach. This vulnerability could lead to invasions by opportunistic neighbors, further exacerbating the crisis and plunging the society into even deeper chaos. A society weakened by famine becomes an easy target, a prize for those who still have the strength to take it. The tools themselves were a marvel of simplicity and inefficiency. You wield a wooden plow, tipped with stone or hardened wood, pulled by oxen, or perhaps, if you're truly desperate, by your own straining muscles. The soil resists, clumping, refusing to yield easily. Sowing is done by hand, broadcasting seeds with a practiced flick of the wrist, hoping they land evenly. Harvesting is a back-breaking affair, cutting stalks with a flint sickle, bundle by painstaking bundle. Threshing, separating the grain from the chaff, is a dusty, arduous process, often done by trampling animals or beating the stalks against a hard surface. Every calorie you consume is the result of countless calories expended in its production. It's a constant, brutal equation. So, when the food ran out, it wasn't just individual bodies that wasted away. It was the entire social body. The intricate web of relationships, institutions, and shared beliefs that defined ancient civilizations could unravel with terrifying speed. You stand amidst the ruins of such a collapse, a silent witness to the profound truth that civilization, for all its grandeur, is built on a surprisingly simple foundation, the ability to feed its people. When that foundation crumbles, everything else inevitably follows, leaving behind a landscape of chaos, desperation, and a chilling reminder of humanity's inherent fragility. So, while the invention of agriculture was a monumental step for humanity, it was also a gamble, a high-stakes game played against the unpredictable forces of nature. Your ancestors, in their quest for a more stable food supply, inadvertently created a system that, while capable of feeding more people, was also incredibly susceptible to catastrophic failure. The promise of abundance was always shadowed by the threat of scarcity, a delicate balance that could be tipped by a single failed rain, a swarm of insects, or a patch of tired soil. You are living proof of that delicate balance, a testament to the fact that even the most groundbreaking innovations come with unforeseen consequences, especially when your survival depends on them. You've witnessed the unraveling of society, the desperate choices, and the brutal reality of a world without food. But amidst this widespread suffering, there was often a stark, infuriating contrast. Tonight, we turn our gaze to The Elite and the Illusion of Plenty, a chilling examination of how the ruling classes, the powerful, and the wealthy often manage to insulate themselves from the worst horrors of famine, creating a disturbing disconnect between their lives and the suffering of the masses. This is where the grand narratives of power reveal their darkest, most hypocritical sides. You've witnessed the precarious dance of early agriculture, the constant struggle against pests and depleted soil. But even with the most diligent farming, the most ingenious irrigation, there was always a higher power, an unpredictable force that could unravel all human effort in a single, devastating season, the wrath of nature. Tonight, you stand on the precipice of a world where the elements aren't just a backdrop to life, but active, often malevolent, participants in your daily struggle for survival. You're about to experience the sheer terror of nature's fury when the rains don't come. Imagine for a moment that you are not the starving villager, but a member of the elite. Perhaps a high-ranking priest, a powerful general, a wealthy merchant, or even a king or queen. Your days are not consumed by the desperate search for food. Your stomach does not gnaw with emptiness. Instead, you wake in a grand palace, a sprawling villa, or a fortified citadel. The walls are thick, the guards are numerous, and the granaries, unlike those of the common folk, are still remarkably full. You might hear whispers of the suffering outside, vague reports of dwindling harvests and restless populations, but they feel distant, abstract, like news from a faraway land. It's like hearing about a massive traffic jam on the radio when you're comfortably flying in a private jet. Annoying for others, but not your problem. Imagine the sky. Not the gentle, nurturing sky, you know, but a vast, indifferent canvas of endless blue. Day after day, week after week. The sun, once a benevolent giver of warmth and light, transforms into a relentless tormentor, baking the earth, sucking every last drop of moisture from the air. You look up, your eyes squinting against the glare, searching for a wisp of cloud, a hint of gray, anything that promises relief. But there is nothing. Just that vast, mocking expanse of blue. The air shimmers above the parched fields, distorting your vision, making the world feel like a cruel mirage. You can almost hear the earth groaning beneath your feet, cracking and splitting into a mosaic of dry, dusty fragments. The first layer of insulation is sheer wealth and power. The elite controlled the resources, the land, and the labor. They owned the largest, most fertile estates, often with access to the most reliable water sources or sophisticated irrigation systems that were beyond the reach of ordinary farmers. When a harvest failed, their fields, though perhaps diminished, still yielded something, while the smaller plots of the peasantry produced nothing. They could afford to invest in better storage facilities, massive granaries built of stone, protected from pests and moisture, ensuring that their reserves lasted longer. You see the massive, imposing structures of their storehouses, guarded by armed men, while your own meager hut offers no such protection for the few scraps you might possess. The first signs are subtle. The leaves on the trees begin to curl, their vibrant green fading to a sickly yellow, then a brittle brown. The small streams, usually babbling with life, shrink to trickles, then to stagnant puddles, and finally into nothing but dry beds littered with sun-bleached stones. The animals, once plump and healthy, grow thin, their ribs stark against their hides. You see them, desperate, digging for roots, nibbling at thorny bushes, their usual foraging grounds now barren. The birds, usually a cheerful chorus, are silent, their songs replaced by the mournful caw of a lone crow circling overhead, a harbinger of despair. Then there was the ability to command. In times of scarcity, the elite could simply demand tribute, taxes, or forced labor from the starving populace, often in the form of grain. While you and your family starve, you might be forced to deliver what little you have to the ruler's storehouses, or to work tirelessly on their lands, producing food that you will never consume. This was not charity, it was coercion, a brutal extraction of resources from those who could least afford to give them. The very system that was supposed to protect you now actively contributed to your suffering, ensuring the survival of the few at the expense of the many. Then, the fields? Oh, the fields. The young shoots, which you had nurtured with such hope, turn crisp and brittle, and they don't just wither. They seem to evaporate, their life force sucked away by the relentless heat. The promising green of spring becomes the dusty brown of a premature autumn. Your heart aches with each step you take through the dying crops, a physical pain that mirrors the emptiness in your stomach. You bend down, picking up a handful of soil, letting it sift through your fingers. It's not rich, dark earth, it's fine. Powdery dust, devoid of life, devoid of hope. It's like trying to bake a cake with sand instead of flour. Good luck with that. A common historical fact is that during famines, the price of food would skyrocket, making it unattainable for the vast majority of the population. However, the wealthy, with their accumulated riches, could still afford to buy what little food was available, often from distant regions or through illicit markets. You see the merchants, their faces impassive, selling meager portions of grain for exorbitant prices, their coffers swelling while the streets outside are filled with the dying. The elite, with their gold and silver, could bypass the local shortages, importing food from areas less affected, or simply outbidding everyone else for the dwindling local supply. It's like a VIP section at the end of the world party, where only the rich get to eat the last can of beans. This isn't just a dry spell, this is a drought. A slow-motion catastrophe that suffocates life inch by agonizing inch. The ground hardens like stone, making it impossible to plant new seeds, even if you had them. The wells, your precious sources of water, begin to run dry, forcing you to travel further and further, to distant, dwindling springs, battling with others for a meager ration. The water you do find is often murky, brackish, and teeming with unseen dangers. You drink it anyway, your thirst overriding any concern for cleanliness, knowing that a bellyache is preferable to the agony of dehydration. Consider the Roman Empire during times of famine. While the common people in Rome and its provinces often faced severe hunger, the emperors and the senatorial class usually maintained their lavish lifestyles. They had vast estates across the empire, ensuring diverse sources of food. They controlled the grain fleets that brought supplies from Egypt and North Africa, prioritizing their own needs and those of the army. While the plebeians rioted for bread, the elite continued to host banquets, perhaps with slightly fewer exotic dishes, but banquets nonetheless. This was a unique detail, the sheer audacity of maintaining such a facade of normalcy amidst widespread death. It's like watching a cooking show while you're stuck on a deserted island. A common historical fact is that ancient civilizations, particularly those reliant on rain-fed agriculture, were acutely vulnerable to long-term climate shifts. The 4 kilo year event, for instance, was a severe aridification event that occurred around 2200 BC, leading to widespread drought and the collapse of several major civilizations, including the Old Kingdom of Egypt and the Akkadian Empire in Mesopotamia. Imagine an entire empire built on the promise of fertile lands, simply crumbling because the skies refuse to open. It's a stark reminder of humanity's fragile place in the grand scheme of nature. The military, which often suffered from the effects of famine, was also a tool for the elite to maintain their advantage. Starving soldiers, as you've seen, are ineffective. Therefore, rulers would prioritize feeding their armies, even at the expense of the civilian population, to prevent rebellion and maintain control. A well-fed army could suppress any unrest born of hunger, ensuring that the starving masses remained subservient. You see the soldiers, their bellies full, their weapons gleaming, patrolling the streets, a stark reminder of who holds the power and who gets to eat. But drought isn't the only natural disaster that could unleash famine. Consider the opposite extreme floods. You wake one night to the sound of torrential rain. Not the gentle pitter-patter you longed for, but a furious drumming that shakes your hut. The river, usually a placid companion, swells into a raging torrent, bursting its banks, engulfing fields, homes, and everything in its path. You scramble to higher ground, carrying your children, your few precious possessions, watching helplessly as your village is swallowed by the muddy waters. The crops, if they hadn't already withered from drought, are now submerged, rotting beneath the churning surface. The granaries, if they weren't swept away, are inundated, their contents ruined. It's like trying to save your sandcastle from a tsunami. Not going to happen. Historians still debate the extent to which ancient rulers were aware of, or truly empathetic to, the suffering of their starving populations. While some records show attempts at relief efforts, these were often too little, too late, or primarily aimed at preventing riots rather than genuinely alleviating suffering. Was it a lack of information, a callous disregard, or simply the immense logistical challenge of feeding millions? The answer is complex, but the outcome was clear: a vast disparity in suffering. Volcanic eruptions, though less frequent, could also trigger widespread famine. A unique detail you might not know is that the eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia in 1815, one of the largest in recorded history, caused a year without a summer in 1816 across the northern hemisphere. The massive amount of ash and aerosols injected into the atmosphere blocked sunlight, leading to global temperature drops, widespread crop failures, and severe famine, even in distant Europe and North America. Imagine the confusion, the terror, as the sun dims, the temperatures plummet, and the crops refuse to grow. all because of an event thousands of miles away that you couldn't possibly comprehend. It's a bit like your internet going out because someone sneezed on a server in another country. Annoying. But on a global life or death scale, earthquakes, Montu, played their part. While they don't directly destroy crops on a wide scale, they can devastate irrigation systems, collapse granaries, and destroy transport routes, effectively cutting off food supplies to entire regions. You feel the ground tremble, a violent shudder that sends cracks through your mud brick walls. The earth opens, swallowing homes, toppling the precious water channels you've toiled to maintain. Suddenly, even if there's food elsewhere, it can't reach you. The infrastructure that connects you to sustenance is shattered, leaving you isolated and vulnerable. Locust plagues, as you briefly touched upon, were another terrifying natural phenomenon. These weren't just a few grasshoppers. These were biblical swarms. Millions upon millions of insects descending like a living, buzzing cloud. They could strip a field bare in hours, leaving nothing but the stalks. You hear them coming. A low hum that grows into a deafening roar. A sound that strikes primal fear into your heart. You try to fight them, waving branches, shouting, banging pots. But it's like trying to stop a river with your bare hands. They are an unstoppable force, a living manifestation of nature's indifference to your plight. Historians still debate whether some of the biblical plagues, particularly the locusts, were exaggerated accounts of actual devastating natural events that regularly afflicted ancient societies. The elite also had the means to escape. When a famine became truly catastrophic, they could retreat to their fortified country estates, or even flee to other less affected regions, taking their wealth and their retinues with them. They were not tethered to the land in the same way the peasantry was. While you were bound to your dying fields, they had the mobility to escape the worst of the crisis, leaving the common people to face the full brunt of the disaster. This mobility was a privilege, a stark demonstration of how wealth could literally buy survival. The impact of these natural disasters wasn't just immediate, it was long-lasting. A single failed harvest could lead to a year, 2 years, even more, of hardship. The stored grain would be depleted, the seeds for the next planting season might be eaten out of desperation, and the weakened population would be less able to work the land, creating a vicious cycle of hunger and diminished capacity. You see the effects ripple through your community: fewer births, more deaths, the elderly and the young succumbing first, their fragile bodies unable to withstand the relentless assault of starvation and disease. Even the diseases that accompanied famine often affected the elite less severely. While they were not immune, their better nutrition, access to cleaner water, and less crowded living conditions meant they were less susceptible to the rampant epidemics that decimated the poor. They might have private physicians, access to rudimentary medicines, and the ability to isolate themselves from the infected. It's like having a really good health insurance plan when everyone else is just hoping they don't get sick. The psychological toll is immense. You live in a constant state of anxiety, your dreams haunted by visions of food, your waking hours consumed by the search for it. Hope, that precious commodity, slowly erodes, replaced by a dull, persistent dread. You watch your neighbors, your friends, grow weaker, their faces becoming skull-like, their movements slow and deliberate. The social fabric begins to fray as desperation takes hold. The communal spirit that once bound your village together starts to unravel under the strain of individual survival. It's a grim transformation, turning people you know into shadows of their former selves, driven by the most basic primal instinct. The psychological impact on the elite, while not involving physical starvation, was different. They lived with the constant threat of rebellion, of their power being overthrown by a desperate populace. They might have experienced a moral burden, a sense of guilt, or perhaps a hardening of their hearts, a rationalization of their privilege. The illusion of their own security was often fragile, built on the suffering of others, and they knew, deep down, that a truly desperate population could eventually breach any wall, no matter how high. So, while human ingenuity gave you agriculture, it also tethered you to the whims of the natural world. The ancient farmer, despite his hard work and knowledge, was ultimately a supplicant, constantly pleading with the heavens for a benevolent hand. A little too much sun, a little too much rain, a sudden tremor in the earth, or a cloud of buzzing insects, Any of these could swiftly turn the promise of a harvest into the nightmare of famine. You are a living testament to this brutal truth. A tiny figure at the mercy of forces far grander and more powerful than any human endeavor. Your survival in this world is not a given. It is a fragile gift, granted only when nature decides to be kind. So, while famine was a universal threat in the ancient world, its impact was far from universal. The elite, through their control of resources, their wealth, and their power, often managed to create a bubble of relative prosperity, an illusion of plenty that stood in stark contrast to the widespread suffering outside their gates. You stand in the shadow of this inequality, a silent witness to the chilling truth that in times of ultimate scarcity, humanity's hierarchies could become even more pronounced, ensuring the survival of the few at the devastating expense of the many. Your own chances of survival in such a world would be inextricably linked to your place in this brutal social order. You've grappled with the unpredictable fury of nature, the relentless sun, the devastating floods, and the swarming locusts. But as if the elements weren't enough, humanity itself often became the architect of its own starvation. Tonight, we delve into a darker chapter, for the very food that sustains life was twisted into a weapon, a tool of conquest and subjugation. You are about to witness war and famine as weapons. A chilling testament to human cruelty and desperation, you've journeyed through the harrowing realities of ancient famine, witnessing nature's indifference, humanity's cruelty, and society's unraveling. You've seen the desperate measures, the stark inequalities, and the sheer, overwhelming despair. But even in the face of such overwhelming odds, humanity, in its stubborn resilience, did not simply surrender. Tonight, we shift our focus to lessons from the past seeking solutions, an exploration of the ingenious, desperate, and sometimes futile attempts by ancient societies to mitigate, adapt to, and even prevent the recurring specter of famine. This is where the human spirit, battered but not entirely broken, sought to push back against the tide of starvation. Imagine the distant rumble. It's not thunder, not the promise of rain, but the ominous sound of marching feet, of chariots rattling, of the clamor of an approaching army. Your heart sinks. You've heard the stories, whispered in hushed tones around meager fires, of what happens when war descends upon a land already teetering on the brink of hunger. This isn't just a battle for territory or glory. This is a war for survival. And the enemy knows that the easiest way to defeat you isn't always with a sword, but with an empty stomach. Imagine, after a particularly devastating famine, the collective sigh of relief as the rains finally return, as the first green shoots tentatively emerge from the scarred earth. This isn't just a moment of joy, it's a moment of profound reflection. How can this be prevented from happening again? What lessons can be gleaned from the recent nightmare? You, as part of this community, would participate in the rebuilding, but also in the remembering, the sharing of knowledge, the desperate search for strategies that might offer a glimmer of hope for the future. The first strategy is simple scorched earth. As the enemy advances or as they retreat, they systematically destroy everything that could sustain life. You watch in horror as your fields, already struggling, are deliberately trampled by cavalry, set ablaze, or salted to render them infertile for years to come. The precious granaries, the collective store of your community's future, are looted, their contents carried away, or worse, deliberately burned, sending plumes of acrid smoke into the sky, a bitter monument to your impending doom. The wells, your lifeblood, are poisoned or filled with rubble. It's a chillingly effective tactic, designed not just to defeat an army, but to break the spirit of an entire population. It's like someone burning down your grocery store just as you were about to buy dinner. Rude and utterly devastating. The most fundamental solution, one that evolved over millennia, was the development of sophisticated irrigation systems. You've seen the fragility of rain-fed agriculture. So, your ancestors, with incredible ingenuity, began to master the flow of water. In Mesopotamia, you would participate in the arduous task of digging and maintaining canals, diverting water from the mighty Tigris and Euphrates rivers to your fields. In Egypt, you would witness the annual miracle of the Nile's inundation. but also the meticulous work of building basins and channels to capture and distribute the fertile floodwaters. These weren't just simple ditches, they were complex networks, requiring immense communal effort, engineering skill, and centralized organization. It's like building a giant, intricate plumbing system for an entire country without any modern tools. Pretty impressive, right? You see the despair in the eyes of your fellow villagers, the farmers who had poured their sweat and hope into the land. Stand by, helpless, as their livelihood is systematically annihilated. The very ground beneath your feet, which once offered the promise of life, now feels like a funeral pyre for your future. This isn't just about losing a harvest, it's about losing the ability to ever grow another one. It's a long-term sentence of starvation, a lingering death that makes the immediate violence of battle almost seem merciful. Beyond grand irrigation projects, there was the constant, painstaking work of improving agricultural techniques. Farmers, through generations of trial and error, learned about crop rotation, even if they didn't understand the scientific principles behind nitrogen fixation. They discovered that planting different crops in sequence could help replenish soil nutrients and reduce pest infestations. You might observe a wise elder showing you how to intercrop different plants, or how to leave a field fallow for a season, allowing it to rest and recover its vitality. They learned about the best times for planting and harvesting, reading the signs of the seasons, the behavior of animals, and the subtle shifts in the weather. This wasn't just farming, it was an art, a science, and a constant dialogue with the land. A common historical fact is the use of siege warfare, which inherently involved starvation as a primary tactic. From ancient Assyrian sieges to the Roman siege of Jerusalem, encircling a city and cutting off its food and water supply was a standard, brutal method to force surrender. You are trapped within the city walls, the gates barred, the enemy encampment a menacing ring around you. Day by day, the food rations dwindle. The initial panic gives way to a grim resignation, then to a desperate scramble. You see the city's defenders, once proud and defiant, grow weaker, their armor hanging loose on their emaciated frames. Their strength, their will to fight, is slowly being eroded not by arrows or spears, but by the relentless pangs of hunger. A common historical fact is the development of extensive grain storage systems. Recognizing that good harvests were often followed by lean years, ancient civilizations invested heavily in building massive granaries, silos, and underground pits to store surplus grain. These weren't just simple sheds, they were often sophisticated structures designed to protect against pests, moisture, and theft. In ancient Egypt, for example, the pharaohs built vast state granaries, often depicted in tomb paintings, which were crucial for surviving periods of low Nile floods. You see the immense effort involved in filling these storehouses, the endless lines of laborers carrying baskets of grain, knowing that every kernel stored is a buffer against future suffering. It's like having a giant emergency food supply that you hope you never have to use, but are eternally grateful for when you do. The air inside the besieged city grows heavy with the smell of desperation. The usual sounds of urban life, the chatter of merchants, the cries of street vendors, are replaced by a haunting silence, broken only by the occasional wail of a hungry child or the distant shouts of the besieging army. You walk through the streets, once bustling with trade, now eerily quiet. The market's empty, the stalls overturned. People wander aimlessly, their eyes hollow, searching for anything edible. You hear whispers of rats being hunted, of leather boiled for sustenance, of desperate mothers trying to quiet their crying infants with water. The city, a symbol of civilization, slowly devolves into a desperate cage of starvation. But storage wasn't just about quantity, it was about preservation. A unique detail often overlooked is the use of natural insecticides and desiccants in ancient grain storage. People would mix ash, sand, or even certain herbs with their stored grain to deter insects and absorb moisture, preventing spoilage. They might also use specific types of clay or plaster to seal storage pits, creating anaerobic conditions that inhibited pest growth. Imagine the careful, almost ritualistic way you would prepare your grain for storage, knowing that its preservation was a matter of life and death. It's a bit like your grandmother's secret recipe for keeping cookies fresh. But instead of cookies, it's your entire family's survival. A unique detail about ancient sieges is the psychological warfare employed through food denial. Sometimes, Besieging armies would parade their own abundant food supplies outside the city walls, slaughtering animals and cooking feast within sight and smell of the starving inhabitants. Imagine the torment, the tantalizing aroma of roasting meat drifting over the walls, while you inside gnaw on a piece of bark. It's a cruel, calculated move, designed to break morale and accelerate surrender. It's like someone eating a delicious pizza right in front of you when you haven't eaten in 3 days. Just evil? Historians still debate the effectiveness of ancient famine relief efforts. While rulers often initiated public works projects like building granaries or canals to provide employment and distribute food, and some even opened royal storehouses. The scale of these efforts was often limited compared to the vastness of the need. Were they truly effective in preventing widespread death, or merely symbolic gestures to maintain social order? The answer likely varies greatly depending on the specific civilization, the severity of the famine, and the resources available. Beyond direct destruction and siege, war also disrupted trade routes, preventing food from reaching areas that needed it. You rely on caravans, on ships, to bring grain from distant fertile lands to supplement your own meager harvests. But now, the roads are unsafe, patrolled by enemy soldiers or marauding bandits. The seas are dangerous, infested with pirates or blockaded by enemy fleets. The flow of goods, the intricate network that connected distant communities, grinds to a halt. Suddenly, even if there's food in the next valley, it might as well be on the moon, because there's no way for it to reach you. This economic warfare, though less dramatic than a burning field, was just as deadly, slowly strangling entire regions into submission. Beyond the practical, there were the social and political responses. Rulers, recognizing the threat of popular unrest, sometimes implemented price controls on grain to prevent merchants from exploiting the starving population. They might organize public distributions of food, albeit often meager ones, to quell riots and maintain their legitimacy. You might see a decree posted in the town square, promising a small ration of grain, and feel a flicker of hope, quickly extinguished by the long lines and the sheer inadequacy of the supply. These measures, while often insufficient, demonstrate an understanding that famine was not just an agricultural problem, but a political one, capable of toppling dynasties. The movement of populations, forced migrations due to conflict, also contributed massively to famine. You are forced to abandon your home, your village, your ancestral lands, fleeing before the advancing army. You join a desperate stream of refugees, carrying what little you can, your children clutching your hand. You walk for days, weeks, through unfamiliar territory, your meager supplies quickly exhausted. The land you pass through is often already stripped bare by previous refugees or the passage of armies. There's no food, no shelter, only the relentless march towards an uncertain future. Many don't survive the journey, succumbing to hunger, disease, or exhaustion along the way. Your journey becomes a testament to the fact that war doesn't just kill on the battlefield, it kills on the road, in the camps, in the desperate search for a new beginning. Diversification of crops was another crucial strategy. Instead of relying on a single staple, communities learned the wisdom of planting a variety of crops, some more drought-resistant, some more flood-tolerant, some ripening at different times. If one crop failed, another might still yield something. This reduced the risk of total crop failure and provided a more varied, and thus more nutritious, diet. You might plant a patch of lentils alongside your wheat, or cultivate different varieties of barley, spreading your bets against nature's unpredictability. It's like having multiple streams of income instead of relying on just one job. Smart move. Historians still debate the extent to which deliberate starvation tactics in ancient warfare were a calculated military strategy versus an inevitable byproduct of prolonged conflict and logistical challenges. Was it always intentional, or simply the brutal reality of armies living off the land and cutting off enemy supplies? Regardless, the outcome for the civilian population was the same profound suffering and death. The development of long-distance trade networks also played a vital role in mitigating localized famines. If one region suffered a crop failure, food could theoretically be imported from a more prosperous area. This required stable political conditions, safe trade routes, and the infrastructure to transport large quantities of goods. The Roman Empire, for instance, relied heavily on its grain fleets from Egypt to feed its massive urban population. While these networks could be disrupted by war or piracy, when they functioned, They offered a critical lifeline, transforming local shortages into manageable challenges rather than catastrophic famines. You might see a caravan arriving, laden with sacks of grain from a distant land, and feel a wave of relief, knowing that for now, the worst has been averted. The aftermath of war was often just as devastating as the conflict itself. Even after the fighting ceased, the land was scarred, the infrastructure destroyed, and the population decimated. There were no resources for rebuilding, no seeds for planting, no able-bodied men left to work the fields. The cycle of famine, once initiated by conflict, could persist for years, even decades, long after the last soldier had left. You return to your village, if there's anything left of it, to find a landscape of ruin. The fields are barren, the homes are rubble, and the faces of the survivors are etched with a trauma that will never fully heal. The war might be over, but the hunger, the ghost of its passing, lingers. Even religious practices evolved to address the constant threat of famine. Prayers, rituals, and sacrifices to rain gods or fertility deities became deeply ingrained in daily life, not just as acts of faith, but as communal expressions of hope and desperation. While we, with our modern scientific understanding, might dismiss these as superstitious, for ancient people, they were a vital psychological and social coping mechanism, providing a sense of agency and collective purpose in the face of overwhelming forces. You participate in the rain dance, your body swaying, your voice joining the chorus of pleas, truly believing that your collective will can influence the heavens. It's a bit like doing a pre-game ritual before a big sports match. You know it might not directly affect the outcome, but it feels good to do something. The illusion of plenty was often maintained through propaganda and public displays. Rulers might hold occasional bread doles or public feasts, carefully orchestrated events designed to project an image of benevolence and abundance, even as their people wasted away. These were symbolic gestures, carefully calculated to quell unrest and reinforce the ruler's legitimacy, rather than providing meaningful relief. You stand in the crowd, a gaunt figure among thousands, jostling for a single loaf of bread thrown from a cart, knowing that this meager offering is a performance, not a solution. It's like getting a free sample of something you desperately need, but you can't afford the full product. The development of early warning systems, rudimentary as they were, also emerged. In some societies, officials would monitor river levels, rainfall patterns, or the state of the crops, providing early indications of potential shortages. While they couldn't prevent a drought, they could at least give people time to prepare, to ration, or to seek assistance. You might see a messenger arriving from the capital, bearing grim news of a poor harvest in a distant province, and begin to prepare your own family for the lean times ahead. This foresight, however limited, was a crucial step towards proactive management rather than reactive desperation. So, while nature could be cruel, humanity, in its darkest moments, proved equally capable of inflicting unimaginable suffering through the deliberate manipulation of food. War didn't just bring death by sword, it brought death by starvation, a slow, agonizing process that broke bodies and shattered spirits. You stand in the shadow of these ancient conflicts, a silent witness to the terrible truth that sometimes the greatest enemy wasn't a drought or a flood, but the calculated cruelty of another human being. Your survival in such times was not just a matter of luck, but often a matter of enduring the deliberate intent to starve you into submission. Finally, the enduring memory of famine itself served as a powerful motivator. The trauma of past starvation shaped cultural practices, economic policies, and even individual behaviors. People learned to save, to be frugal, to value every scrap of food. The stories of past famines were passed down through generations, serving as cautionary tales and reinforcing the need for preparedness. You, having lived through such a nightmare, would carry the scars of hunger, forever influencing your decisions, your priorities, and your appreciation for the simple act of a full meal. You've endured the caprice of nature and the calculated cruelty of human conflict, both relentless architects of starvation. But as if hunger itself wasn't a potent enough killer, it rarely arrived alone. Tonight, we uncover the insidious partnership between famine and disease, a deadly duo that swept through ancient populations, leaving devastation in their wake. You are about to witness disease-famine's constant companion, and understand why an empty stomach was often just the first step towards a much more terrifying end. So, while the ancient world was constantly haunted by the specter of famine, it was not a passive victim. Through ingenuity, cooperation, foresight, and sheer determination, ancient societies developed a range of strategies, from massive irrigation projects and sophisticated storage to crop diversification and trade networks, to push back against the terrible reality of food scarcity. You stand as a testament to this enduring human struggle, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming natural forces and social inequalities, the drive to survive, to learn, and to adapt is a powerful and persistent force. Your journey through this history reveals not just the horrors of the past, but the profound lessons learned. Lessons that continue to resonate in our world today. Imagine your body already a hollow vessel, its energy reserves long depleted. Every movement feels like a monumental effort, every thought a struggle. Your muscles, once firm, have wasted away, leaving your skin stretched taut over bone. Your eyes are sunken, your hair brittle, and your skin, once vibrant, now has a pallid, almost translucent quality. This is the physical state of prolonged starvation, a body teetering on the brink, desperately trying to conserve what little life force remains. But this weakened state isn't just uncomfortable, it's an open invitation, a gaping vulnerability that unseen enemies are eager to exploit. You've journeyed through the ancient world, a silent witness to the chilling reality of famine. You've seen the parched earth, the desperate faces, the unraveling of societies. You've learned about the ingenious, yet often insufficient, ways ancient peoples tried to fight back. Now, as we prepare to leave the dust-filled annals of history, you might feel a sense of relief, a comfort in knowing that such horrors are confined to a distant past. But tonight, as the final chapter unfolds, we must confront a sobering truth, the ancient ghost still present. The specter of famine, though perhaps cloaked in different forms, still haunts our modern world, and the lessons from the past resonate with a disquieting relevance. The first and most immediate consequence of severe malnutrition is the collapse of your immune system. Your body, starved of essential nutrients, proteins, vitamins, minerals, simply cannot produce the antibodies and white blood cells needed to fight off even the most common infections. A simple cold, a minor cut, a fleeting stomach bug that a healthy person would barely notice can become a life-threatening ordeal. You feel a persistent chill, a dull ache in your bones, a constant fatigue that no amount of rest can alleviate. You cough, a dry, hacking sound that rattles your chest, and you know, with a chilling certainty, that your body is failing you. It's like trying to defend a fortress with a handful of sleepy guards when the enemy has an entire army. The outcome is pretty predictable. Imagine yourself back in your own time, surrounded by the comforts and conveniences you take for granted. You open your refrigerator, overflowing with choices. You scroll through endless food delivery options on your phone. The idea of not having enough to eat, of truly starving, feels like a distant, almost unimaginable nightmare. This sense of security, this illusion of endless abundance, is a testament to the incredible progress humanity has made in agriculture, logistics, and global trade. We've built systems designed to prevent the widespread starvation that plagued your ancient counterparts. But these systems, for all their sophistication, are not infallible. Then come the infections. Dysentery, often called the bloody flug, becomes rampant. You experience agonizing stomach cramps, relentless diarrhea, and a rapid loss of fluids. Your body, already dehydrated from lack of water, quickly succumbs. The disease spreads like wildfire through your village, transmitted through contaminated water and inadequate sanitation, which inevitably worsen during times of crisis. You see children, their tiny bodies already frail, wasting away before your eyes, their cries growing weaker until they fall silent. The latrines, if they even exist, overflow, mixing with the dust and the desperate attempts to find food, creating a breeding ground for bacteria. The fundamental drivers of ancient famine climate, conflict, and disease remain potent threats today. You see the headlines, hear the news reports: prolonged droughts devastating crops in one continent, torrential floods washing away livelihoods in another. Climate change, a phenomenon far grander and more complex than anything your ancient ancestors could have conceived, is intensifying these extreme weather events. The very same sun that baked ancient fields now contributes to rising global temperatures, disrupting age-old agricultural patterns. The rains, when they come, are often too much or too little, mirroring the fickle skies that tormented ancient farmers. It's like the universe decided to play a cruel trick, giving us advanced technology but then throwing bigger, nastier curveballs. Typhus, carried by lice and fleas, thrives in overcrowded, unsanitary conditions, which are the norm when populations are displaced or confined during famine. You feel the itching, an incessant torment that drives you to scratch until your skin is raw. Then comes the fever, a burning heat that consumes you, followed by a rash, a headache so severe it feels like your skull is splitting, and a profound weakness that pins you to your meager mat. Your mind becomes clouded, drifting in and out of consciousness, haunted by feverish dreams. The close proximity of starving people, huddled together for warmth and what little comfort they can find, creates the perfect environment for these tiny, deadly carriers to spread their misery. It's like a tiny, invisible army, picking off the weakest links in the chain. Conflict, too, continues to wield famine as a weapon. You watch news reports of besieged cities, of humanitarian aid convoys blocked, of fields deliberately destroyed. The tactics may have evolved, but the grim outcome remains the same: civilians caught in the crossfire, starved into submission. Modern warfare, and with its sophisticated weapons and complex geopolitical motivations, still creates conditions where food becomes a tool of war, just as it did in ancient sieges. The displacement of populations, the disruption of supply chains, the destruction of infrastructure, all familiar echoes of the past, playing out on a global stage. It's like we upgraded our weapons, but forgot to upgrade our humanity. Still using the same old cruel tricks. Cholera, a terrifying waterborne disease, also rears its head. When clean water sources dry up or become contaminated, and people are forced to drink from stagnant pools or polluted rivers, cholera strikes with brutal speed. You experience violent vomiting and diarrhea, leading to rapid dehydration and death within hours, sometimes even minutes. The sight of a cholera victim, their eyes sunken, their skin shriveled, is a horrifying testament to the disease's power. The desperate search for water, combined with the lack of hygiene, turns every communal water source into a potential death trap. And disease, that insidious companion of ancient famine, remains a formidable foe. While modern medicine has conquered many ancient scourges, malnutrition still weakens immune systems, making populations vulnerable to outbreaks. You see reports of cholera epidemics in refugee camps, of measles outbreaks in areas suffering from food insecurity. The link between hunger and susceptibility to illness is as strong today as it was millennia ago. A weakened body, whether from ancient grains or modern aid, is still a vulnerable body. It's a bit like having a fancy, high-tech alarm system, but leaving the front door wide open, not very effective. Is it? A common historical fact is that more people often died from disease during famines than from direct starvation. The weakened state of the population made them highly susceptible to epidemics that might otherwise have been contained. For instance, during the Irish Great Famine in the mid-19th century, while starvation was rampant, diseases like typhoid, cholera, and dysentery were responsible for a significant portion of the deaths, often exacerbated by the overcrowded conditions in workhouses and refugee camps. This grim reality highlights the interconnectedness of food security and public health, a lesson learned repeatedly throughout history. A common historical fact is that despite global food production being sufficient to feed the entire world population, food insecurity and famine persist due to issues of access, distribution, and political instability. This is a crucial distinction from ancient times. Your ancient counterpart faced an absolute scarcity of food. You, in the modern world, face a paradox of plenty enough food exists, but it doesn't always reach those who need it most. This highlights the shift from purely environmental challenges to complex socioeconomic and political ones. It's like having a giant pie, but some people are locked out of the kitchen. Beyond these acute infections, chronic malnutrition leads to a host of other debilitating conditions. Scurvy, caused by a lack of vitamin C, results in bleeding gums, painful joints, and extreme fatigue. You feel your teeth loosening, your limbs aching, and your skin bruising at the slightest touch. Bearberry. From a deficiency of vitamin B1 can lead to heart failure and neurological damage, causing weakness and paralysis. Pellagra. From a lack of vitamin B3 manifests as dermatitis, diarrhea, and dementia. These aren't just minor inconveniences, they are slow, agonizing forms of torture that further cripple your body and mind, making it impossible to work, to search for food, or even to care for yourself. It's like your body is slowly falling apart, piece by piece, because it doesn't have the right building blocks. Consider the intricate global supply chains that feed your modern world. A disruption in one part of the world, a conflict, a natural disaster. A pandemic can send ripples across continents, impacting food prices and availability thousands of miles away. You might see the price of your favorite coffee or grain suddenly jump, a consequence of events in a distant land. This interconnectedness, while enabling abundance, also creates new vulnerabilities. Your ancient counterpart was largely dependent on local conditions. You are now dependent on a global web, a delicate balance that can be easily upset. It's like having all your eggs in one very, very long, very complicated basket. A unique detail often overlooked is the psychological impact of seeing your community ravaged by disease on top of starvation. The constant fear of contagion, the sight of loved ones succumbing, the inability to properly bury the dead, all contribute to a profound sense of helplessness and despair. You see the fear in your neighbor's eyes, a deeper, more primal terror than even hunger itself. They avoid contact, even with those they once loved, for fear of catching the invisible killer. The social bonds, already strained by starvation, fray even further under the shadow of epidemic. It's a bit like being in a horror movie where the monster is invisible and can strike anyone at any time. Not exactly a fun night out. A unique detail about modern food insecurity is the concept of hidden hunger malnutrition, caused not by a lack of calories, but by a deficiency of essential micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals. While people might consume enough calories to survive, their diet lacks the diversity needed for optimal health, leading to long-term health problems and reduced productivity. This was also a factor in ancient famines, but often overshadowed by outright starvation. Today, even where food is available, its nutritional quality can be a silent killer, slowly eroding health and potential. It's like eating only candy for a year. You won't starve, but you definitely won't be winning any marathons. Historians still debate the precise mortality rates attributable to specific diseases versus direct starvation during ancient famines, given the limited and often anecdotal records. The lines were often blurred, as starvation weakened the body, making it a fertile ground for disease, and disease, in turn, prevented people from seeking or consuming what little food might be available. It was a vicious feedback loop, a death spiral that was incredibly difficult to escape once it began. Historians and economists still debate the most effective long-term strategies for achieving global food security in the face of climate change, population growth, and persistent conflicts. Is it technological innovation, improved governance, fairer trade policies, or a combination of all these? The question remains open, a complex challenge that humanity continues to grapple with, drawing lessons from both the successes and failures of the past. The movement of people, forced by famine to seek food elsewhere, inadvertently became vectors for disease. As refugees fled from one region to another, they carried their illnesses with them, introducing new pathogens to already vulnerable populations. You join the desperate exodus, a stream of emaciated figures shuffling along dusty roads. You know that every cough, every sneeze, every touch could be spreading the unseen enemy. The camps that spring up along the migration routes, overcrowded and unsanitary, become epicenters of contagion, turning temporary shelters into mass graves. The memory of famine, though perhaps not as visceral for you, still shapes global policies and humanitarian efforts. Organizations like the United Nations World Food Program, born from the collective recognition of past horrors, work tirelessly to deliver aid, build resilience, and advocate for sustainable food systems. You contribute, perhaps unknowingly, to these efforts through your taxes or charitable donations. A collective acknowledgement that the ghost of ancient famine still demands our attention. Even the very act of seeking food could expose you to new diseases. eating unfamiliar or contaminated famine foods could introduce parasites or toxins into your already compromised system. You might consume wild plants that are mildly poisonous, or scavenge for scraps that are spoiled, leading to further illness and weakening. The desperate choices you make to survive often come with a hidden cost, accelerating your decline rather than preventing it. The ancient solutions: irrigation, crop diversification, storage, trade have been refined and scaled up exponentially. We have satellite technology to predict droughts, advanced genetics to create more resilient crops, and global logistics networks to transport food across oceans. Yet, the core challenges remain ensuring equitable access, managing environmental impacts, and navigating the complexities of human conflict and governance. The tools are different, but the fundamental problems are eerily similar. So, while the image of starvation is often one of a slow, agonizing death from lack of calories, the reality for most ancient people was far more complex and terrifying. Hunger opened the door, but disease often delivered the final, brutal blow. You stand in the shadow of this grim partnership, a silent witness to the fact that in the ancient world, an empty stomach was rarely the end of the story. More often, it was just the beginning of a rapid descent into a world teeming with unseen killers waiting to claim their weakened prey. Your survival in such times was not just a battle against hunger, but a desperate fight against an invisible army of pathogens. A battle you were rarely equipped to win. So, as we conclude this journey, you are left with a profound understanding. The terrible reality of ancient food famine isn't just a historical footnote, it's a powerful cautionary tale. It reminds us of humanity's enduring vulnerability, the delicate balance between abundance and scarcity, and the constant, ongoing struggle to feed ourselves. The past isn't just behind us, it echoes in the present. A silent reminder that the fight for food security is a timeless battle, one that requires continuous vigilance, innovation, and compassion. You, with your full belly and easy access to food, are a beneficiary of millennia of human struggle and ingenuity. Cherish it, understand its fragility, and remember the ancient ghost that still whispers warnings from the shadows of history. You've witnessed the relentless assault of nature, the calculated cruelty of war, and the insidious partnership of disease, all conspiring to strip away your sustenance and your strength. Now, as the last vestiges of hope dwindle, you are pushed to the very edge of human endurance. Tonight, we confront desperate measures survival at any cost, a chilling exploration of the extreme choices people were forced to make when faced with the absolute certainty of starvation. This is where the veneer of civilization thins, and the raw or primal instinct to survive takes over.